Good afternoon, everybody. It's 12 o'clock on the dot, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's legislative webinar. For those I don't know or haven't met yet, my name's Patty Mulvihill. I'm the executive director. I haven't been on for a couple weeks because I've been traveling on league business and it doesn't always work with scheduling to be here. But just want to welcome everybody to the meeting. As a reminder, if you haven't already made sure to update your screen name, please do so, particularly putting in your name and the city you represent. We ask for the city representation because when we get to the Q&A portion of the day, we do our best to make sure we call on city officials before any non-city officials, respecting that it's important for us to communicate with our members before non-members. So for today's legislative webinar, we're going to talk about several key things. The first is going to be Senate Bill 916. Many of you should be familiar with this. It's a bill that would provide unemployment benefits for striking workers. When that's finished, we're going to give you a brief update on a recent Oregon Government Ethics Commission opinion that deals with food and beverages. For those of you that are on listservs that the LOC manages, you've probably seen some information about this opinion already. Then we'll pivot to House Bill 3692. Again, we've talked about this one a lot this year. It deals with transient lodging tax flexibility. We'll talk about the 2025 transportation package. Still don't have a bill number, but we'll talk about the package. And then Senate Bill 83, which deals with wildfire funding and mapping changes. That's what we have specifically on the agenda today. When we finish with that and we get to the Q&A portion, if there are other bills that you'd like us to discuss, you can raise your hand or you can make a note in the chat, and we will get to those as we can. We do have a hard stop at 1 today. We stop at 1 no matter what. I would ask for those lobbyists who are on the call, if you haven't already done so, make sure that your contact information and a brief summary of your portfolio is put into the chat so people know who to contact if they have questions after today's webinar. We're going to start, like I mentioned, with Senate Bill 916. That's being managed by LOC General Governance lobbyist Scott Winkles. Scott's coming online now. Scott, you've given us updates on 916 lots of times this session, but where are we as we approach the end?
Well, we are at the culmination point, I think. The bill came out of the House Rules or the House Committee on Labor and Workplace Standards a couple of weeks ago. And it is now headed, we expect it to be second read on the floor on Tuesday of next week with a third reading, which means the final vote on Wednesday. We think this is possible for us to beat this on the floor. We do our vote counting inside the building makes us think that we do have a shot at defeating this bill, or potentially getting it sent back to rules for a favorable amendment. If you recall from a previous update, we did attempt to offer a compromise, a mitigating amendment that would have mimicked the unemployment insurance law passed in Washington recently. That bill capped benefits at 6 weeks and placed a two-week ineligibility period on applications and on top of the additional or the standard 1 week waiting period. So essentially what would have been a three for the vast majority of employees who were out on strike, they would likely have been waiting 3 weeks before they could file for unemployment benefits if they are unemployed due to a lawful strike. And so that was offered. That's almost verbatim for what was passed up in Washington. That amendment was rejected. For our part, the offer was still on the table, and if we can make sure that we keep the pressure on our legislators, I think we can be in good shape to either defeat this bill or get it amended. So we'll be sending out a membership-wide alert this afternoon. I've placed a link to an Oregonian editorial on this bill. Our alert will include the other media coverage on it. Media coverage on this has not been favorable to proponents in my estimation. I mean, I might be biased, but I think this bill is popular inside the Capitol, and I don't think there's a lot of broad support outside of the Oregon Capitol. So that's where we are. We will have an update, good for good or bad, next week. But this is where we're at. We're at the wire.
Scott, is there anybody that we need to specifically ask members to target, or is it just everybody?
I think all House members need to hear. I think even if your House member has told you where they are on this bill, um, if they're a no, we need to support them. If they are I don't want to vote on it, but will be a yes on the floor, they need to hear that. I think those members can help us get this bill back to committee. And if they're a no, and particularly if they're in the majority caucus, then they definitely need to hear from our members and to know that we've got their back on this vote.
Excellent.
I think the politics on this inside the building have been pretty hardball. So they need to know, the people who are sticking up for us need to know that we're supporting them.
Excellent. And if people have questions, they can contact you about the bill.
Absolutely, and I hope they do.
Great. So before you jump off, Scott, you're also the person who has the privilege of handling issues before the Oregon Government Ethics Commission. Is that fair to
Yes,
say?
yes, I am.
Can you give us an update on a recent opinion that came out from the commission itself that deals with food and beverages and will impact all of our members?
Sure. We discussed this a bit on last week's call. The league had asked for the Oregon Government Ethics Commission to overrule the executive director's advice on food and beverages received by a public official that from the public body they serve. And so if you're an employee or a volunteer and you get, and there's food at a meeting or beverages provided, that what the Oregon Government Ethics Executive Commission director said was that had to be part of your official compensation package, which is kind of weird because we're actually required to provide people with cool and cold beverages by law under according to OSHA's heat rules, or food provided to city councilors at part of dinner at a lengthy council meeting. The ruling, I think the general consensus of our membership and of others is that the ruling was absurd. We have asked, and Representative Bowman offered proactively to assist us in getting a legislative council opinion. Legislative council are the attorneys for the Oregon State Legislature. They asked them to opine as to the correctness of the OGEC's opinion. We believe the OGEC erred. The league lobbied. We testified in front of the commission, both myself and Jamie, our general counsel. We had Chad Jacobs, a well-respected municipal attorney, also submitted some legal arguments as to why the OGEC erred, but the commission elected to support their executive director. What we would anticipate is that LC opinion, if that comes back favorably, and we believe it will, that the legislators would send a letter asking the OGEC to reconsider. I think there's a lot of politics surrounding the OGEC right now. I mean, to be fair, we've created those, but I think there is some opportunity for us to get this resolved without needing legislation. I think the timing with the legislative session sine die so close, getting a bill out this session to correct it, I think isn't realistic on an entirely new topic. But I think we can get some administrative action on this. I think really what's interesting is that cities are actually in a slightly favorable position on this than our counterparts at the districts and the community college, because their elected officials are actually prohibited from receiving any compensation by statute. So they're kind of out there right now, but we are working this. We're being very aggressive. I think everyone in the building everyone we've talked to about it is very perplexed as to why the OGEC went there and their reasoning. So that's where we're at.
Thanks, Scott. And just to follow up on Scott, we are working this hard strategically to get an administrative fix if we can. And if not, Scott is part of a team where we're going to try and do some comprehensive reforms in 2026. So we will continue to be very assertive, if not aggressive, on what we consider to be a gross overstep by the commission and its staff. Thank you, Scott, for everything you've done on both the Senate bill and the OGEC matter. We're going to pivot next to Jenna. Most of you are probably familiar with Jenna. She's our tax and finance lobbyist. She's been working really hard to try and get us some flexibility with transient lodging tax revenues this year. Jenna, we're almost at the end of session. Where are we on this key priority bill? And for reference, I believe it's House Bill 3962 we're working off of right now, correct?
Yeah, thanks, Patty. And it's House Bill 3962 with the -2 amendment, because if you just do the base bill, it's a study related to local taxation, which could mean so much more. But for those who haven't been following this very closely, our goal of that bill is to add tourism impacted services as defined as public safety and community infrastructure as part of one of the allowable uses to the restricted 70% of transient lodging taxes that passed post 2003. So very technical, but I think if you were here last week, I said that we had done our first rounds of negotiation with the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association and legislators from the House Revenue Committee and the sponsors of the bill. Nothing really came out of last week's negotiations, and this week not much else changed. There were a couple of ideas thrown out of the table that were non-starters for LOC, like a moratorium on increasing lodging taxes, or just straight up capping the rate in which cities could charge for a lodging tax in perpetuity. If anyone is familiar with franchise fees, once there's like preemption of like a rate cap, they're really hard to remove. And so those were the only two options kind of offered up on the table, which were not something that's reasonable for us when we're really looking for additional flexibility of what to spend this money on. And it wasn't in like, we get the flexibility and we do this. So not a lot of new ideas were populating. Rep. Nathanson, who was leading the negotiation after having like two kind of failed attempts to have our friends from the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association give any ideas or counter proposals, has kind of left it up to the sponsors of the bill of where they want to go next, of whether they want to amend the bill or not. I'm in the process with meeting with them and encouraging them to stick with the -2 amendment. So my ask of you all this week is, if you have relationships with Representative Walters, who is the former mayor of West Lynn, if you have a relationship with Senator Weber, who also was the former mayor of Tillamook, and if you have relationships with Rep. Javity, to kind of have some don't be super aggressive about it, but some conversations about, we would love for you to just move with the -2. That would be great. So if you could put in a good word with those three folks, that would be great. I will also work with them. I will say they have been awesome champions of trying to make sure that local governments continue to have flexibility going forward. I know for the folks on the coast, so Representative Javity and Senator Weber, they are getting a lot of pushback from their caucus of wanting there to be some negotiated deal with Orla. So we will see what happens, but I think they were also equally frustrated with the negotiations and where they're going. So we have a real shot that we could just go with the -2. And so hopefully next week I'll have that to confirm with folks.
Jenna, can I follow up? You said that the sponsors, at least the coastal ones, are getting pushback from their caucus to negotiate with Orla. Is there any room for members to talk to those colleagues and express that perhaps the -2 is still appropriate in negotiations that are one-sided, or perhaps not negotiations at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing here is both of them are Republican. So if you have I would focus on the House Republican members. If you have a House Republican member as your representative, if you support transient lodging tax flexibility, please have a conversation with them. So if it gets caucused, they don't lock against it except for the sponsors. And then on the opposite side, Senator Weber is a Republican. And so I would say, from a secondary message, talk to your Senate Republicans if you have a senator who is Republican representing your district.
Great. Thanks, Jenna. Keep up the good work. We're going to finish today with our legislative director, Jim McCauley. Jim's got two issues for us today, but Jim, can we call it a transportation bill? Is it still a package? Where are we?
Yeah, so apologies for everybody. I think I make promises every Friday that, hey, we'll see some language in the next week. But this effectively has been and continues to be kind of a Groundhog Day with repeating the same story. There's little pieces of new information that I've shared within the bulletin article this week to help kind of get you up to speed. So we're obviously running up against a timeline here where session closes up. And one thing that I've repeated, and I'll still keep the optimism here, is that the last transportation package we had in 2017 was literally not voted on until the last week of session. In fact, the last 3 days of session. So I expect us still to be able to cross the finish line with a robust transportation package. That's something that has been a priority of ours since the start of session. There's a couple of nuances that have changed, or maybe added to the overall conversation here. I think probably the most important one is the emergence of a possible cap and trade program for the state of Oregon. That's something that has been fiercely debated in the past. If folks draw back the timeline a little bit to when Governor Brown was in office, she issued an executive order essentially directing state agencies to respond to a climate emergency. What emerged out of that was what's called the Climate Protection Program. It's withstood some legal challenges. It's capable of generating somewhere around $150 million annually off of emissions. And that was thrown out as a possible new revenue source. Now, I don't know if that ultimately is going to make it into the overall transportation package. It's kind of interesting because I think what's been happening since the original framework came out that talked about a $1.9 billion per biennium investment is they don't have enough votes, I'll just say flat out, to have a 3/5 majority to have 100% of that original framework that they came out with. So what has been happening, probably on a daily basis, is a lot of negotiations, a lot of behind the scenes negotiations. So there hasn't been a whole lot of transparency here. I think largely the reason for that is they want to be able to bring a final transportation package into the process that has the 3/5 votes and has the best chance at being able to move through both chambers. And typically, if you introduce something like that, perhaps too early, there's plenty of opportunities to lose votes because of the different lobbying that will take place within the caucuses and things of that nature. So as it stands right now, we still expect this to be a robust package. We expect 50-30-20 to still be that core component for us. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to get an additional funding allocation for the small city allotment program. A lot of the cities that are out there that are under 5,000 have benefited greatly over the last 7-8 years that program has been in place. That's a $5 million allocation annually, competitive grant program. And historically, they get $15 to $17 million worth of qualified grant requests. So we'd like to see that get bumped up in this process. I think ultimately, this is really, like I said, on the front end of this conversation, comes down to getting those votes and finding 3/5. They want to make this bipartisan because I think they feel that they're going to lose some Democratic votes. So that means they're going to need a number of Republicans to replace possible Democrats that don't vote for it. But again, there's some benefits here across the board. I mean, what we have pitched to you over the last several weeks, a couple of months actually on this thing, is that because of 50-30-20, you can guarantee that every single community in Oregon is going to see value come directly to their neighborhoods, either at the county level or certainly at the city level. Those are huge changes. That original framework was a 70% increase once full implementation after 6 years for cities. And that's potentially some generational investments in a lot of neighborhoods that need those types of upgrades, and to try to get ahead of the poor conditions that are out there on city streets. Our survey work has shown 40% of the city streets that are out there are in poor or in very poor condition. And if the legislature decides to step away from a transportation package this time around, those conditions are only going to get worse. And there's no question that we have advocated not just for the investment piece, but we want to see transit funding to expand those shuttle services in rural parts of Oregon. We want to make sure that ODOT has some clear and objective standards. The accountability element is going to be significant in this bill. And based on the committee this week, they held hearings and had actually third-party consultants come in and talk about ODOT's big project structure and offered a number of amendments to try to improve how ODOT does their business. So I still think this is going forward. We're going to see language for sure next week. I don't know when, could be Wednesday, could be at the end of the week, but they plan on having starting hearings the second week of June. So that puts it into, I think the 9th and 10th is when we'll start seeing hearings on this.
Jim, is there any lobbying efforts you need from the members on anything yet, or are we waiting until we see what the bill actually says?
No, it's a good question. I mean, it's always helpful to see more details, and I just quite frankly don't have that. But I think the best thing that you can continue to do is to articulate how important this transportation package is to your community. Talk about the 50-30-20, talk about the multimodal component of it and the value that brings to your community. Because I think literally once we get into that hearing schedule, we may only have 2 hearings before it moves to the final stages of votes. And that's really where that advocacy is going to have to kick up to try to make sure that your legislators are willing to vote on this package and that you're willing to support them and support their vote to have a transportation package. This is going to be a lift because the amount of revenue that's coming out of it, the different layers of revenue that are coming out of it. And I think the one thing that's really important for you to be able to talk to your constituents about, or when you have concerns in your own community, Oregon right now is a bargain in terms of the overall tax burden when you own a vehicle from the entire Western US. Every one of our Western states, whether they border us or maybe a state away, to register vehicles, it's 2, 3, 4, 5 times what the cost is in Oregon. And while ours is going to increase, it will still be the lowest overall vehicle tax burden from the entire Western US. And that's largely because other states have got sales taxes, and that's how they structure their registration fees for vehicles. And some of them have an amortization schedule where those fees drop a little bit each year. But, you know, a $40,000 vehicle to register in Idaho, believe it or not, is just under $2,000. In Nevada, that same vehicle is about $3,500. And in Oregon, it's when you look at an entire year's worth of registration, it's about $400.
All right, Jim, we're not done yet.
Nope.
And so Senate Bill 83, which deals with wildfire funding and mapping changes. This is timely since I think we saw the state's first wildfire pop up in the last 10 days out in Eastern Oregon. So what do the members need to know about Senate Bill 83?
So Senate Bill 83 has moved through both chambers. It's on its way to the governor's desk. This has been a pretty contentious, I'll just say overall part of the wildfire policy. We set out with Senate Bill 762 in 2021. There was going to be a regulatory component of it that was built off of essentially a wildfire hazard mapping structure. Due to, I'll just say, private landowner objections to being in those maps, it was dropped from the overall structure and regulatory mechanism that was in place. So specifically what Senate Bill 83 does is it repeals the map, it repeals all state regulatory oversight, wildfire requirements, defensible space, home hardening, those were all part of the bill. Those are all gone. What isn't gone, and the expectation from the legislature, as well as how this is going to be worked in the future, is that local governments, cities and counties are going to have the ability to adopt their own local ordinances. We will have the R327 guidelines, which are effectively is a code for home hardening. That will be in place. And cities have the ability to adopt that ordinance at a local level, go through whatever ordinance process you have, and make the case to adopt that in your communities. You also will have the ability to have the same structure for defensible space. So essentially trying to create some type of risk reduction around homes, neighborhoods, and things of that nature. That still is very much part of that local level. So effectively what this bill has done is it's transferred a statewide standard with a regulatory approach with state agencies and turn it over to the local governments. So cities and counties, this is going to be in your purview going forward. We will probably have some kind of webinar structure after session with the State Fire Marshal's office, as well as DCBS, which is the building code side of things, and Department of Forestry, and provide some educational opportunities for cities to take a look at. But once this gets signed, it's going to, again, turn all of that wildfire hazard reduction over to the local governments.
Okay, thanks, Jim. That's it for what I would call our case in chief, our updates to you. If you have questions on any of the bills or the problems we talked about today, or anything off that we didn't discuss, you can either drop your question in the chat, or you could raise your proverbial Zoom hand and we'll call on you to ask your question. So we like to give people a few minutes to try and type their questions if they prefer. A few things. I am seeing Mayor Kathy Clark of Kaiser. She's got her hand up. Mayor Clark, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, we'll see what we can do about answering it.
Thanks. Really quick, just following up on the wildfire legislation. It sounds like the jurisdictional authority is going to be to the cities, or is it going to go to special districts? What about fire districts? I mean, who ultimately is going to be responsible for passing regulations and then enforcement? I don't
Good
think our
question.
fire district's going to want to.
Yeah, so, Mayor, good question. It really does fall to the cities and counties on this. I don't believe the special districts, unless you're in some of the fire protection districts out in Eastern Oregon and things of that nature, have the authority for establishing ordinances. So yeah, it will fall onto the cities and the counties to respond.
Even though we don't have fire service, Kaiser has 2 fire districts, and we have no authority over them. So that's just even doing fireworks has been difficult.
Yeah. No,
I'm interested to see how this pans out.
I understand. I think this is, I think there's an expectation from some legislators that somehow if you do it at the city or county level, you're going to magically solve the debate. I'm not convinced that's going to happen, because I think you're still going to have objections from private landowners to fall in line with these ordinances, whether they're developers or whether they're individual homeowners and things of that nature. So I think if there's a focus on some education and try to get some funding in for some demonstration projects and things of that nature, that's certainly something that State Fire Marshal's office is going to be holding true to.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Hey, Jim, I've got a private note that says Senate Bill 83 was kicked back to rules.
Yeah, I just looked at that and reread the final motion on this. I was going to correct myself on this thing. So yeah, this thing is being held up right now. I'll just say politics is kind of where it's going at this point.
Okay. Thanks. And then there's another note in the chat for those who follow it that says the City of Sisters has just passed a defensible space code for new builds. And Jennifer Letts from the city has put in her contact information if you've got questions. We have a question, I believe, from Dr. Padilla from Gold Beach. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, we'll see if we can get it answered.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Greetings from Gold Beach. My question was about HB 3366. I'm not sure if this is the right time to ask, but can we get an update on that bill with the Regional Training Center for Firefighters?
No, thank you for asking that. Scott, if you're available, I thought I'd turn this one over to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for the questions. We're aware of the bill. It was specific to one region of the state. The bill is currently sitting in Ways and Means with I don't know that it's been referred to a subcommittee yet. If you're tracking the bill, you'll want to. That's a good sign that the bill has legs. If they actually do refer it for work at one of the subcommittees of the Ways and Means Committee, I think it's sitting there with a lot of competition for very scarce dollars this time. Is my take on it. You know, the league does weigh in on statewide on Ways and Means asks that are beneficial to the whole membership. So we might help the fire marshal's office out. That's beneficial to everybody. But we're really not in a position to assist parts of the state because we serve all the cities. So if you are looking at a bill in Ways and Means, that's the sort of we should expect to see those referrals start popping as soon as they're finished with the actual agency budgets, which I want to say is going to be next week if all goes to plan. Not that anything has this session, but that would be the idea.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Scott.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, if you've got questions, keep dropping them in. Two things just to generally tell everybody. First of all, the annual conference this year is in October, but we are opening scholarship applications this Monday. We open scholarship applications before actual registration, so we don't have to refund anybody their registration fees. So I know a lot of cities are struggling financially right now and trying to pass budgets with deficits. If you are a community who feels like attending the conference could be cost prohibitive, on Monday, you should be in line to try and file an application so you can be considered for one of our scholarships. My budget, much like most of the city's budgets, have not fully passed yet, but just as a side, we have in our budget proposed that the board adopt essentially double the scholarship amount so that we can get more people to the conference this year. So we have a bigger pot that we're hoping to consider, but Monday is the opening deadline for that. Registration for those who like to guarantee that they register day of is July 15th. We should be able to get everybody in the conference hotel this year, but I do know that some of you, particularly your city recorders, are super nervous about that. So if you want to flag your calendar, that would be the question. That would be the date to do it, is July 15th. There is a question from the city of Scappoose in the court. I lost it. Is there a copy of the webinar from House Bill 3518 on May 20th? They'd like to listen to it. I'll let staff answer that question. Was there a webinar on that one, Jenna?
Yeah, so House Bill 3518 was a webinar on the tax assessment, tax assessors bill, so paying for tax assessors essentially from the counties, and there's a methodology that was not recorded. However, I do have some materials that I can follow up with you, and I will send you a direct email, Carol. So if anyone else missed that webinar on assessment and taxation funding, feel free to email me and I'll get you any materials. And you can always call me and talk to me about it if you want to know more.
Thanks, thanks, Jenna. Last one note, if anybody has final questions, just so you know about it, we are offering a $59 webinar system development charge training on June 26th from 10 a.m. to noon. We often get lots of questions on system development charges, so we are partnering with an outside firm to provide that. It is webinar based, so you can attend it from anywhere. You can register for that on our LOC website's training portal. The other one is an in-person training. It's Mastering Media Interactions. It's here in Salem at the League's office on June 11th for $249 if you feel like you need some help on public speaking or interacting with the media. I'm not seeing any more questions popping up in the chat or any more virtual hands coming up. So I will give this a conclusion by thanking all of you for showing up. We hope to see you next Friday, same time, same place. We'll give you more updates. Thanks for everything you do for your cities and your communities. And we appreciate everything you've done this session in terms of grassroots lobbying to help us make some headway over in the Capitol. Have a good weekend, everyone.